Unit 5 Issues of Epistemology. Contents 5.1 Introduction, 5.2 Some major concerns of epistemology, 5.3 Rationalism, 5.4 Empiricism, 5.5 Idealism, 5.6 Phenomenology bracketing experience, 5.7 Conclusion. Learning objectives. It is expected that after reading Unit 5 you will be able to carry out the following task: gain familiarity with the issues of epistemology or theory of knowledge, link the different currents in philosophy, namely rationalism, empiricism, idealism and phenomenology, with understanding the social reality around us. 5.1 Introduction. Epistemology is a branch of philosophy that tries to understand the nature, source and limits of knowledge. You may ask, why are we talking about a branch of philosophy in a sociology course? While reading Unit 5, you would find that the philosophical issues discussed here forms the foundation of explanations in theories about the social world. Unit 6 and 7 clearly shows the influences of philosophical ideas on writings of sociologists. In order to better understand the contents of this unit, it is a good idea to gain familiarity with the issues of epistemology. Human beings have a tendency to want to explain and understand the world around them. Leading a variety of explanations, it is very common these days for a large section of humanity to look for explanations that are scientific, but at one time such explanations brought the wrath of the authorities. But at one time such explanations brought the wrath of authorities, usually religious authority. As science made increasing strides, revealing in turn the secrets of nature over which humankind tried to rule, the methodologies employed by the natural and physical science came to rule as to what should be the best methods of acquiring knowledge. Behind this quest for seeking knowledge were many issues that were grappled by not only scientists and knowledge seekers, but also people who ask philosophical questions. As Greek philosopher Aristotle rightly said, all philosophy originates from the basic sense of wonder human being experience, and what this sense of wonder that lead to different explanations of theories. It is therefore not surprising that on the question of knowledge there are several contesting viewpoints. The question of what is true or adequate knowledge in a way translate into an issue of scientific methodology. In Unit 5 we will look at some broad issues concerning our understanding of the social reality around us, with reference to particular philosophers in the context of different schools of thought. After introducing some major concerns of epistemology in section 5.2, we will discuss the theories of rationalism, empiricism and idealism in section 5.3, 5.4 and 5.5 respectively. These theories reflect the positivist outlook to understand the social phenomena. Not everyone agreed with the assumptions discussed in the three schools of thought, namely rationalism, empiricism and idealism. Many scholars looked for meaning in observations they made. They are focused on phenomenology, which is a school of thought taking us in a new direction to understand the social reality. The new developments have been discussed in section 5.6. 5.2 Some major concerns of epistemology. So we are going to talk about some of the central concerns of epistemology, which deals with the issues such as what is the source of knowledge and what is knowledge, and how do we know which is truth and how it is it different from justification. In other words, epistemology is mainly concerned with the nature, source, scope and limits of knowledge. The perspective adopted in different schools of thought is tied up with an overall metaphysical slant of that particular school. You may ask, what is metaphysics? Metaphysics refers to the branch of philosophy that attempts to understand the fundamental nature of all reality, whether visible or invisible. It seeks a description so basic, so essentially simple and inclusive that it applies to everything, whether divine or human or anything. It attempts to tell what anything must like. So a metaphysician is trying to discover what underlines everything. Though in sociology metaphysical questions do not concern us, while discussing epistemology or issues related with knowledge, it is good to keep in mind that many philosophical ideas about knowledge have a metaphysical edge to them. For example, you will find that Kant's notion of the existence of one's consciousness proves the existence of objects outside one has a metaphysical slant to it. When we look at the history of epistemology, we can discern a clear trend in spite of the confusion of many seemingly contradictory positions. The trend indicates that theories of knowledge stress its absolute permanent character. For more philosophers, the things we perceive are more than sense perceptions. They are an interactive outcome of mindful mind or soul. Following the Renaissance revival of the art of literature in Europe, under the influence of classical models in the 14th and 16th century, two main epistemological positions or theories of knowledge dominated philosophical inquiry into the theory of knowledge, namely empiricism and rationalism. Empiricism reviews knowledge as the product of sensory perception. This theory holds that the origin of all knowledge is sense experience. The term also refers to the method of observation and experiment used in the natural science. Often rationalism is contrasted with empiricism. Rationalism is a theory which holds that the mind may apprehend some truths directly without requiring the medium of the sense. Let us first discuss the theory of rationalism. 5.3 Rationalism. Greek philosophers, mainly Pythagoras, Plato, Aristotle, laid the foundation of logical thinking. The principal tenet of rationalism or logical thinking is that truth can be best discovered through reason and rational thought. Rationalist assumes that the world is deterministic and that cause and effect hold for all events. They also assumes that these can be understood through sufficient understanding and thought. The priori from cause to effect or rational insight is a source of much knowledge. Sense experience, on the other hand, is seen as being too confusing and tentative. Logic and mathematics are classical rational disciplines, as is philosophy. Rational argument is particularly attractive as it implies a superior intellect, and we all use it regularly, although the truth of our assertions is often open to question. Prominent rationalists include Descartes, Spinoza, and Leibniz. We will be discussing the ideas of Descartes, who was the most prominent of them all. Descartes, I think, therefore I am. Descartes is regarded as the first modern thinker who has provided a philosophical framework for the natural sciences. Descartes attempts to arrive at a fundamental set of principles that one can know as true without any doubt. To achieve this, he employs a method called methodological skepticism. He doubts an idea that can be doubted. He gives the example of dreaming. In a dream, one sense perceives things that seem real but do not actually exist. He argues that in a similar manner, one cannot rely on the data of the senses as necessarily true. Or he says that perhaps an evil genius exists who is a supremely powerful and cunning being and set out to try to deceive Descartes from knowing the true nature of reality. Given these possibilities, Descartes asks, what can one know for certain? Before coming to Descartes' answers to the question, let us know a little more about him. See box number 5.1. Box number 5.1. René Descartes. Descartes was born in a village in France in the year 1596. He studied in a Jesuit school a wide range of subjects and excelled in mathematics. Descartes made a number of important contributions to mathematics and physics. Most enduring of his contribution was the foundation with Galileo Galilei of what is known as analytic geometry. In 1649, Descartes moved to Stockholm at the cost of Queen Christina of Sweden, who employed him as a philosophy tutor. Christina scheduled the lectures at 5 a.m. The early hours and harsh climate took their toll on Descartes, already weak in health. He died shortly after in 1650. During his life, Descartes' fame rose into such an extent that many Catholics believed he would be a candidate for sainthood. As his body was transported from Sweden back to France, anxious relic collectors along the path removed pieces of his body. By the time his body reached France, it was considerably reduced in size. Descartes' philosophy developed in the context of Renaissance and early modern philosophy. Like the humanist, he rejected religious authority in the cost of scientific and philosophical knowledge. Mathematicians consider Descartes of the utmost importance for his discovery of analytical geometry. Up to Descartes' time, geometry dealing with lines and shapes and algebra with numbers appeared as completely different subsets of mathematics. Descartes showed how to translate all problems in geometry into problems in algebra by regarding them as a question asking for the length of a line segment and using a coordinate system to describe the problem. Descartes' theory proved the basics for the calculus of Newton and Leibniz, and in this manner for much modern mathematics. This appears even more astounding when one keeps in mind that the work was just meant as an example to discourse de methode. Descartes' methodology of pure reason and separations of mind and body was a problem which continued to haunt methodologies of social sciences. In fact, Kant questioned his basic dualism in his book Critique of Pure Reason. Though Kant attempted to remove that dualism, he could not fully escape it. We will discuss this issue in section 5 of Idealism. Here, we proceed with another aspects of Descartes' contributions. It deals with his quest for way of obtaining scientific and philosophical knowledge. To come back to the question, what can one know for certain? Let us know how at what Descartes has to say. Initially, Descartes arrived at only a single principle, that is, if I am being deceived, then surely I must exist. Most famously, this is known as cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. In this manner, Descartes concluded that he can certain that he exists, but in what form? You perceive your body through the use of senses. However, in Descartes' logic, this have previously proven unreliable. So Descartes proposes that at this point he would only say that he is a thinking thing, thinking in his essence, as it is the only thing about him that cannot be doubted. To further demonstrate the limitations of the senses, Descartes proceeds with what is known as the wax argument. He considers a piece of wax and his senses informs him that it was a certain characteristic such as shape, texture, size, color, smell, and so forth. However, when he brings the wax towards a flame, these characteristics change completely. However, it seems that it is still the same thing. It is still a piece of wax. Even though the data of the senses inform him that all its characteristics are now different, therefore, in order properly to grasp the nature of the wax, He cannot use the sense and he must use his mind. Descartes conclude, thus when I thought I had seen with my eyes, I actually grasped solely with the faculty of judgment which is in my mind. In this manner, Descartes proceeds to construct a system of knowledge, discarding perceptions as unreliable and instead admitting only deduction as a method. Halfway through the method, published in 1637, entitled in French as Discours de la Méthode, he also claims to prove the existence of a benevolent God who, being benevolent, has provided him with a working mind and a sensory system, and who cannot desire to deceive him, as thus finally he establishes the possibility of acquiring knowledge about the world based on deductions and perceptions. So it would appear that for Descartes the ultimate certainty emanates from God. These propositions of Descartes did not go well with the empiricists in the England. They were against the pure metaphysical facts. They brought into focus the body and experience as being the source of knowledge. Let us discuss about these ideas in detail in section 5.4 on empiricism. 5.4 Empiricism. Empiricism surfaced as reactions to rationalist arguments and the events that were transforming the British society influenced the way it took roots in the way Anglo-Saxons perceived social reality. The first of these events was in the English Civil War, in which the monarchy of feudalism were challenged. The second was in the increasing demand for individual rights and equality among all human beings. The third was unprecedented growth of commerce and science that was fueled by inventions and discoveries such as Boyle's experiments to understand the basics of gases, Leeuwenhoek's use of microscope to discover the world of bacteria, and William Harvey's discovery of the circulation of blood. The laws of motion established by Newton, who used Descartes' theory of his calculus, influenced the way the empiricists developed the arguments which went beyond Descartes' rationalism. You may say that in a way such empiricists as John Locke combined the forces of experience and reflections. David Hume's skepticism and questioning, on the other hand, paved the way for establishing the empiricist tradition in social inquiry. Hume concluded that what began with Locke in laying the foundations for many methodological questions that came up in the philosophy of sciences. This is why we will discuss their ideas in details in this section. Before proceeding to the details, let us have a few words to introduce empiricism. The central principle of empiricism is that truth comes only from direct experience. Words can only be understood if they are connected by their recipients to actual experience. The word empirical comes from the Greek word emphyria, means experience, and its history goes back to Plato and sophist, which has the same root as sophisticated. British empiricism refers to the 18th century philosophical movements in Great Britain, which maintained that all knowledge comes from experience. As mentioned before, in contrast to the empiricists, the rationalists maintain that knowledge comes from foundational concepts known intuitively through reason, such as innate ideas. Other concepts are then deductively drawn from these. British empiricists staunchly rejected the theory of innate ideas and argued that knowledge is based on both sense experience and internal and mental experience. Such an emotions as self-reflection, let us see what they have to say by examining some of the fundamental ideas of John Locke and David Hume as the foremost representative of British empiricism. John Locke, from sensation to reflection. Locke was concerned with the materials out of which our knowledge is made. He wanted to examine the characteristics and limitations of human knowledge. In his books, an essay concerning human understanding, 1690, Locke stated his central ideas. Now we look at a biographical note on John Locke, box number 5.2, John Locke. John Locke was one of the most respected British philosophers, Oxford academic and researcher of medicine. He served as a physician to Lord Ashley Cooper, the Earl of Shaftesbury, and supervised an operation to remove a cyst from Lord Ashley's liver. The operation was successful. He served as a government official in charge of collecting information about trades and colonies. He was an economic writer, political activist, and a revolutionary whose cause ultimately triumphed in the glorious revolutions of 1688. Much of the Locke's work is characteristic by oppositions to authoritarianism. This opposition is both at the level of the individual person and at the level of institutions such as the government and the church. He believed that there were no divine rights for monarch to rule and that human beings are free, and in this condition all human beings are equal. From Locke, the mind of a child is like a blank sheet of paper and all ideas come from actual experiences. The mind has no innate ideas, but it can innate faculties. It perceives, remembers, and combines the ideas, comes into it. The mind discerns, deliberates, and wills, and these mental activities are themselves the source of a new class of ideas. Experience is therefore twofold. On the one hand, there are ideas of sensations of seeing, hearing, touching, etc. And on the other hand, there are ideas of reflections, which are thinking, believing, etc. The first ideas are simple, where the mind is passive, and the second one is of reflections are more complex and active. Such ideas reflect our awareness of our own mental experience, introspection. As for the relations between the idea and the object, the experiences, Locke makes a further distinction. He argues that objects have qualities which produce an idea in the mind. Locke said there were primary and secondary qualities. Primary qualities are qualities which are produced by the senses, such as smell, color, taste, and sound. The secondary qualities are those which refers to bulk, hardness, volume, etc. According to Locke, the mechanical operations of nature remains hidden to us. Careful observation and experimentations may support a reliable set of generalizations about the experience of the kind of things we commonly encounter, but we cannot even conceive of their true natures. What we know essentially, according to Locke, is the nominal essence of an idea of thing or thing, but thus common names for substances are general terms by means of which we classify as we observe them to be. We can agree upon the meaning of such terms each through we remain ignorant of the real essences of the things themselves. Locke held that the extent of our knowledge is quite limited. The most we can hope for it is probable knowledge. He extends this argument to the general nature of knowledge and comes up with a deceptively simple notion of knowledge as the perception of agreement or disagreement of ideas. The result of all this is that our knowledge is limited. As per Locke definitions, we can achieve genuine knowledge only when we have clear ideas and can trace the connections between them enough to perceive their agreement or disagreement. That doesn't happen very often, especially where substances are at issue. Locke's efforts have therefore led to the sobering conclusions that certainty is rarely within our reach, and therefore we must often contend with the probable knowledge or mere opinion. Locke ultimately recommends that we adopt significantly reduced epistemological expectations. Hume takes another steps and reduces one's expectations of certainty of knowledge by being skeptic to begin with. John Locke influenced the way his contemporaries viewed the process of human understanding. Many of them disagreed with his ideas. His main critique came from George Berkeley, who wrote two books, treatises concerning the principles of human knowledge and three dialogues between Hylas and Philonos. In his replies to the view of John Locke, quite contrary to Locke's theory that the fundamental essence of the world was matter and mind was only a perceived instrument, George Berkeley placed his mind first and asserted that things exist only when they are perceived by a mind. A point out earlier, John Locke had his supporters too. One of them was the Scottish philosopher David Hume, who applied the Locke's ideas in a logical manner and argued that all thought is built up from simple and separate impressions. Let us examine his ideas a little further. David Hume, relief as a habit. David Hume, for a note on his contributions to box 5.3, argued that as human beings do not in fact live and function in the physical world, as we should try to observe how they do so. According to Hume, the proper goal of philosophy is simply to explain why we believe what we do. Box number 5.3, David Hume is generally regarded as the most important philosopher ever to write in English. Hume's major philosophical work as treatise of human nature and the queries of concerning human understanding and concerning the principles of morals, as well as the posthumously published dialogues concerning natural religion, it remains widely and deeply influential despite their being denounced by many of his contemporaries as works of skepticism and atheism. While Hume's influence is evident in the moral philosophy and economic writings of his close friend Adam Smith, he also awakened Immanuel Kant for his dogmatic slumbers and caused the scales to fall from Jeremy Bentham's eyes. Charles Darwin counted Hume as a central influence. Hume's analysis of human belief begins with a careful distinctions among our mental contents of impressions, which are the direct, vivid and forceful product of immediate experience. Ideas are mere copies of these original impressions. For example, the color of the tree at which I am now looking is an impression, while my memory of color of my mother's hair is merely an idea. Since each idea must be derived from an antecedent impression, Hume supposed it always makes sense to inquire into the origins of ideas by asking from which impression it is derived. The apparent connections of one idea to another is invariably the result of an association that we manufacture ourselves. We use our mental operations to link ideas to each other in one or of three ways: resemblance, continuity, or cause and effect. You can give such example as this: animals looks like that animal, this book is on that table, moving this switch turns off the light, etc. Experience provides us with both the ideas themselves and our awareness of their association. All human beliefs result from the repeated application of these simple associations. Such belief can reach beyond the content of present sense impressions and memory by appealing to presumed connections of cause and effect. But since each idea is distinct and separable from every other, there is no self-evident relations. These connections can only be derived from our experience of similar cases. Hume argues that causal reasoning can never be justified rationally. In order to learn, we must suppose that our past experience bears some relevance to present and future cases. Although we do need believe that the future will be like the past, the truth of that belief is not self-evident. In fact, it is always possible for nature to change, so influences from past to future are never rationally certain. Thus, in Hume's view, all beliefs as a matter of fact are fundamentally non-rational. You may consider Hume's favorite examples about our belief that the sun will rise tomorrow. Clearly, this is a matter of fact. It rests on our conviction that each sunrise is an effect caused by the rotation of the earth. But our belief in that causal relation is based on past observations and our confidence that it will continue tomorrow cannot be justified by reference to the past. So we have no rational basis for believing that the sun will rise tomorrow, yet we do believe it. Skepticism quite properly forbids us to speculate beyond the content of our present experience and memory, yet we find it entirely natural to believe much more than that. Hume held that these unjustifiable beliefs can be explained by reference to custom or habit. That is how we learn from experience. When I observe the constant conjunction of events in my experience, I grow accustomed to associating them with each other. Although many past cases of sunrise do not guarantee the future of nature, my experience of them does get me used to the idea and produces in me an expectation that the sun will rise again tomorrow. I cannot prove that it will, but I feel that it must. Remember that the association of ideas is a powerful natural process in which separate ideas come to be joined together in the mind. Of course, they can be associated with each other by rational means, as they are in the relations of ideas that constitute mathematical knowledge. But even where this is possible, Hume argued reason is a slow and inefficient guide, while the habits acquired by much repetitions can produce a powerful conviction that is independent of reason. Our beliefs in matters of fact arise from sentiments rather than from reason. For Hume, imaginations and belief differ only in the degree of conviction with which their objects are anticipated. Although this positive answer may seem disappointing, Hume maintained that the custom or habit is the guide of life and the foundation of all natural sciences. The primitive human belief, Hume noted, is that we actually see and hear, etc., the physical objects themselves. But modern philosophy and science had persuaded us that this is not literally true. According to the representationalist philosophy, we have no direct experience of presumed cause. If we know objects only by means of ideas, then we cannot use those ideas to establish a causal connections between the things and the objects they were supposed to represent. In fact, Hume supposed that our belief in the reality of an external world is entirely non-rational. It cannot be supported either as a relations of ideas or even as a matter of fact, although it is utterly unjustifiable. However, belief in the external world is natural and unavoidable. We are in the habit of supposing that our ideas have external references, even though we can have no real evidence for doing so. Where does this leave us? Hume believed himself to be carrying out the empiricist program with rigorous consistency. Locke honestly proposed the possibility of deriving knowledge from experience, but did not carry it far enough, and Berkeley noticed further implications. Next, Hume has shown that empiricism inevitably leads to an utter and total skepticism. According to Hume, knowledge of pure mathematics is secure because it rests only on the relationship of ideas without presuming anything about the world. Experimental observation, conducted without any assumptions of the existence of natural materials, permits us to use or experience in forming useful habits. Any other epistemological effort, especially if it is involved in the pretense of achieving useful abstract knowledge, is meaningless and unreliable. The most reasonable positions Hume held is an mitigated skepticism that humbly accepts the limitations of human knowledge while pursuing the legitimate aims of mathematics and the sciences. In our non-philosophical moments, of course, we will be thrown back upon the natural beliefs of everyday life, no matter how lacking is rational. Hume thought that a human being is a bundle of different perceptions and in that sense has no fixed identity. He critically criticized the idea that everything has a cause. In fact, he doubted everything that we assume on the basis of our common sense and also on the basis of scientific knowledge Philosophers have found it hard to answer the pertaining doubts. Hume influenced philosophical debates about principle of knowledge. As mentioned earlier, Hume has been described as awakening Kant from his dogmatic slumber. It is partly a reaction to Hume as that Kant accepted a theory of knowledge. He wanted to rise above the skepticism of Hume to look for certainties, yet he was not in favor of the pure rationalism of Descartes. Immanuel Kant took rationality of the human mind to a transcendental level, and this attempt put him in the category of idealist. In the next section, we will carry forward our discussions of theories of knowledge to cover the idealist approach to understanding the social reality around us. Before moving on to the next section, it is good idea to complete reflection and action 5.1 exercise for absorbing what John Locke and David Hume have said about the ways of acquiring knowledge. Reflection and action 5.1. According to Locke, our ideas about things comes out of our experience of sensations and reflections, and Hume takes it further by concluding that a lot of what we think of as certainties are only habits. What are you expected to do? In the light of the above statements, find out from at least 5%, including those who haven't been schooled in scientific explanations, as to how they will explain the movement of the sun and how they perceive that the earth is round. Write a short note of about 500 words on their explanations and share it with the fellow students and academic counselor at your study center. So we will continue the chapter in the next video. Thank you.